And the quilt along continues, everybody. I am Rob Appell from Michael Miller Fabrics. Welcome to Making It Fun. And we are in Peek into Batik. We are in month number 3, block number 3. And this is it. This is the original quilt. Oh, I'm blowing parts and pieces everywhere. That's all right. I'm going to walk you through all the steps, using my favorite colors, my favorite basics, the hash dot and the marble and the jet black. But I'm going to show you how to make. We've already done blocks 1, 2, and now today we're doing block 3 of this awesome batik and jet black quilt. Super simple steps, and each block center is just a bit different. The outside frames are the same. I'll show you how to do everything today. Let me retidy my pile up here, and we are going to dive right in. The instructions, if you need them, are available at michaelmillerfabrics.com. Over on the blog, there's the Peek into Batik there in the corner, and you can get instructions for either the rotary cutting instructions, or obviously we've partnered with AccuQuilt, and you can AccuQuilt these. And if you watched the last month's video where I went up and did a surprise tack at Mel Beach's home studio, and we used her AccuQuilt cutting machine there, and we cut all of the blocks, and they actually matched right up with my rotary cutting blocks. But I'm back in the studio, so we're doing rotary today. So I have these instructions in front of me. It's going to be a blast. Make sure the iron's hot. We're going to need that in a second. And I'm starting with 3-inch squares. And so I'm going to need 2 black 3-inch squares, and I'm going to need one of each of my colors, blue and green here. And we're going to need to put these diagonal lines across the back because we're going to sew these into 2 half-square triangles. Diagonal line was installed very simply, but the point I want to put out today is not only am I using the ruler here from tip to tip, but I'm using an ultra fine Sharpie marker. This is going to be a cut line, so I'm not worried about it transferring, but by having an ultra fine Sharpie, I have a very fine little line, and that's going to make sure that both half square triangles are equal. I hope. At any rate, once I have that put together, I'm going to put these 2 squares now right sides together. So that was drawn on the back side, not on the print side of my hash dot. And then as I come over to my sewing machine, that line is actually the seam allowance marker line. And so I'm going to lower my presser foot with my edge guide right on that line, and I'm going to begin sewing. And I'm going to sew all the way through to the end. And I'm just going to actually lift my presser foot, and I'm going to swing this thing back around, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, essentially stitching out 2 half-square triangles. Now that I've done the same to both of those squares, we need to go ahead and cut these open. So I'm going to lay my ruler and cutter just for safety there. And I'm cutting right on that line we just drew a second ago. Pretty easy, right? Okay. Now these are going to create half square triangles, and whenever we're making half square triangles, we press to the dark side by holding the darker fabric up in the air, pressing and letting the iron do all the work as it sets over. The next step is we have our third color, and these are our 2 7/8 squares, and I have 4 of them. And what I need to do is I need to divide these into half to be triangles. Triangles, that's the words we're looking for right now. So that's going to be done very simply again with just by using the rotary cutter. If you're going to stack up all 4 like I just did, make sure they're stacked accurately. We don't have a lot of extra wiggle room here, but those are going to be made like that. And then you're going to go ahead and basically take 2 of them, and you're going to connect them to the black parts of each of these half square triangles. So they're going to form in a shape like this, which will form one large triangle. And we're going to start by sewing. And here's our trick. When we start by sewing this on here, I'm looking at this long straight edge there, and I'm just going to fold this over, lining up the long straight edge, and I know there's going to be a little bit of overlap on each of these corners. So now as we just come over here, we're just going to sew from the top down along that straight line all the way through. Now we're going to press it over, and then we're going to join in the other triangle right here. So put the first one on, press it so that you can carry the seam through on the second side. lining up this straight edge and that straight edge. And if your black triangle's framed in between the two new colors, you've got it right. So make 3 more, and we'll be right back to put on the other side of the triangle. And now that I've got my 4th triangle patchwork there put together, I'm going to grab 2 more of my squares that I've created, both from the blue and the green. These are 4 7/8 inch size squares, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to cut these in half now diagonally to marry them to their like colors. So I'm going to go ahead and just carefully here, and I know I see that other one over there. I'll stop, I promise. Okay, and then we're going to take these here, and you're just going to match them to their common colors, just like this. It's going to be super simple as we go across and lay over there like that. Now, one of the tricks I've been learning as I've been sewing more and more of my triangles, my patchworks together like this, is if I lay this over this way, and not only am I looking at this seam allowance, but I'm also looking at these edges. If those stay nice and square, my patchwork should also stay nice and square as well. So I'm going to come up here, I'm just going to drop that presser foot. And for these, you can really chain piece. So let's just get all 4 of them made real quick. One right after the other. Just don't go so fast that your patchwork doesn't look good. So after you get those all put together, you can just cut them open, right? You can even use your little thread cutter on your machine if you haven't seen that trick before. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to press these over. Probably easiest just to press them into the solid piece, the piece we just added on. Let them cool for a second, because remember, fabric has memory, and it'll lay best if we just let it chill for a minute, literally. But we already have all the units we needed to make the center of our block 3 peek into batik. So for these, now what we're going to do is we're going to line these up so that the blue big triangles come into the center here and here, opposite corners like that, okay? And then the green portions are going to point outward like this and like this. And that's our block construction. So now I'm just going to stitch these 2 by 2, laying these over, matching the corners. And this time I'm also going to press with the blue one in my hand because it should be on the opposite side. Double checking my pattern real quick to make sure I know that the blue ones go to the center as they do. My seams are going to nest, so I'm just going to flip them like this. Line up the centers, then line up my top corner. Got a little bit of bulk in there, but that edge guide's going to drop on the outside of it there. Let's pull that in right nice. Matching up now the actual union between the squares. Keep that center point on. Once I cross that, if I need to make any slight tug or adjustment down here, I'm also good. And we're ready to press this open. And we have now completely finished the center of block 3. Looks like that, and I got to get that little thread off of there. Perfect, right? Following the instructions, I guess it's sitting there just like that, but it's a block so you can put it any way you like. Now that that part's done, we're going to need about 8 of these squares. These are 4.5. I'm going to need 4 of these rectangles. These are 4.5 by 8.5. And then I'm also going to need 4 more of the 4.5-inch squares that are also in black. So on this particular version of doing this, I've already taken and drawn those same diagonal lines across the back of the 4x4 squares. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to lay this over a corner like you see it here. And I'm just matching up all the way around, especially this outside edge. And now this time as I lower it under the presser foot, I'm actually going to stitch right on that diagonal line. So I'm looking to make sure I can see that in the hole where the needle goes through. I'm just going to go ahead and start stitching straight across, all the way up to that outer edge. Now we're going to go straight to the cutting surface. And if you trust yourself, you don't need to use the ruler, but it's always safer if you do. Give yourself a 1/4 inch seam allowance this way. Now you're going to be able to flop this over, and I want you to press it before you put the other piece on, because this is going to give you a really nice union and point. So that has already been stitched on, trimmed off, and pressed. Now I'm going to grab the other point, and this is where you really want to make sure you're paying attention. I want to make sure that I'm building into a triangle of the black, as you see here. So now that I'm lining this up, now I'm looking at this outer edge really specifically. We're going to stitch this on, sewing on the line this time. Unlike when we did our half square triangles and we used the line as our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this is that important because it's going to come up and bond that first 2 pieces. We cut that there. Now at this point I'm keeping this tool handy so I can come after every seam, cut that off, press this open. That looks like that, and I'm going to do the same to these last 3 rectangles. As soon as I have those done, I'll show you how to marry all the pieces back together to finish out block number 3. Okay, and as I'm finishing this last edition of this square here, and I'm trimming this off, I'm realizing something I should really point out to us. If we do a nice job in saving these, we're going to have a bunch of these, and that's another perfect creation of a half square triangle right there that you can use for all kinds of different projects and additions and stuff. So save these pieces, keep them nice and organized, make some half square triangles to play with, and then as you finish ironing out these, I did jump ahead a little bit, and I took those little squares we had of the black fabrics as well, and I've already stitched them to these outside edges here, making I have very long rectangles and very short rectangles. And we're going to go ahead and now build out our star this way by taking our center, and we're going to just make sure that we're putting our points away, and we're going to start with our small edges, and we're going to go ahead and just line those up, looking for my center points here, and stitch this right on. Super easy. So just put on one short side and then the next, making sure though that you know which way your rectangle is going to lie. Don't get going too fast. Once the short outside portions are on, we're going to press those, and I'm just going to press these up and out of the way. And now just checking that orientation again, we want to make sure we get our star built correctly. Have a few more stitch points to line up, which always makes things easier. You have more of that patchwork to work with. Cut that thread, pull it on over, hit it with your iron, and then show off your handiwork. Look at that. We have block number 3, Peek into Batiks, all set and done for you, just like that, following the rotary cutting instructions. As a quick reminder, also on the blog, there are the instructions for the AccuQuilt, which we think is fantastic. We have the beautiful Peek into Batiks sew along happening, going. Awesome, beautiful, big quilt. We're going to cover all of the blocks one way or another and continually make sure we're all making it fun. I will see you all real soon in another video. Thanks for being here. Please subscribe. Take care of yourselves.